The marble floors of the Cook County Courthouse are cold, but not as cold as the look in my ex-wife's eyes. As I walked toward Courtroom 402, the heavy oak doors felt like the entrance to a tomb. Standing there draped in a designer silk dress that I likely paid for, was Elena. Beside her stood Marcus, the man she told me was just a consultant until I found the hotel receipts. Elena didn't look away. Instead, she let out a soft, melodic laugh that echoed against the high ceilings. It was a sound that used to bring me peace. Now it felt like a serrated blade. As I passed them, Marcus leaned in, his voice a low, oily rasp. "Look at him," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "He's already a ghost. He just hasn't realized he's dead yet." I kept my eyes fixed forward, my briefcase handle slick with the sweat of my palms. They thought this was a standard divorce hearing. They thought they had stripped me of my dignity, my home, and my savings. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just here to sign papers. I was here to dismantle their lives. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand the life we built in the suburbs of Naperville, Illinois. I was a structural engineer, a man who believed in foundations. I spent 10 years building a life for Elena that was supposed to be unbreakable. We had the colonial house with the wraparound porch, the golden retriever in a retirement fund that looked like a phone number. I was the kind of man who checked the blueprints twice. I looked for stress fractures in every project I managed across the Midwest. I was responsible for bridges and high-rises, ensuring that thousands of people stayed safe every day. But while I was busy stabilizing the world outside, the ground beneath my own home was liquefying. I worked 60-hour weeks, often driving through the night to job sites in Ohio and Michigan, thinking I was securing our future. I trusted her implicitly. When she started staying late at charity functions or coming home smelling of a cologne that definitely wasn't mine, I told myself I was being paranoid. I chose to believe the lies because the truth was too heavy to carry. I loved her with the kind of blind devotion that architects usually reserve for their greatest masterpieces. Little did I know, she was already drawing up the demolition plans. The rot didn't happen overnight, it was subtle. It started with Elena suggesting we diversify our assets. She introduced me to Marcus at a summer gala. He was polished, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and spoke with an Ivy League confidence that seemed bulletproof. He was a wealth manager, he said. He promised to take our steady, engineer-managed savings and turn them into a legacy. I let him in. I gave him access to our portfolios. I saw the way Elena looked at him. It wasn't the look a client gives a professional. It was the look of a co-conspirator. But I was tired, burnt out from a decade of heavy lifting, and I wanted to believe that I could finally rest. I let my guard down, and that was my first mistake. By the winter of 2025, where the atmosphere in our home had shifted, the laughter was gone, replaced by a chilling politeness. Elena was always on her phone, shielding the screen. When I asked her about our upcoming anniversary trip to Charleston, she just shrugged. "Let's see where the finances are, David," she'd say, her voice devoid of emotion. The collapse began on a rainy Tuesday in March. I had returned early from a site visit in Detroit because a massive storm had canceled the final inspection. The house was quiet, too quiet. The dog didn't even bark. Elena had taken him to the groomers. On the kitchen island sat Elena's tablet, vibrating incessantly. She had left it behind in her rush to get out of the house. I shouldn't have looked. I've never been the type to pry. But something, call it an engineer's instinct for a failing structure, told me to pick it up. The screen wasn't locked. A notification popped up, a message from Marcus. "The offshore transfer is complete. He won't suspect a thing until the accounts are bone dry. See you tonight, my queen. Our flight to Madrid is booked for the 22nd. My blood turned to ice. I felt a physical weight pressed down on my chest, like a structural failure in my own ribcage. I didn't confront her then. I'm a builder. I know that if you pull a support beam too early, the whole ceiling falls on your head. I needed to see how deep the rot went. I sat in the dark for 3 hours, staring at that screen, until I heard her car pull into the driveway. I wiped my face, put the tablet back exactly where I found it, and went to the basement to work on some drawings. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. Do you think David should have confronted her the moment he saw that text, or was he right to wait? I spent the next month playing the part of the oblivious husband. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every time she kissed me goodnight, I felt like I was being touched by a ghost. Every time she thanked me for the hard work I was doing, I wanted to scream. Instead, I hired a private investigator named Elias, a former IRS agent who specialized in forensic accounting. I didn't just want photos of them at a hotel. I wanted the paper trail. I wanted to know where my sweat and blood had gone. What Elias found wasn't just an affair. It was a systematic execution of my financial life. Marcus wasn't just a lover, he was a shark. He was a disbarred attorney from Florida who had moved to Illinois to reinvent himself. He had coached Elena on how to funnel money into shell companies. They were planning to leave the country the moment the divorce was finalized, leaving me with the debt, the mortgage, and a pile of legal wreckage. Elias showed me the spreadsheets. Over $450,000 had been moved in small increments, just enough to stay under the radar of most automated bank alerts. They were using a layering technique, moving the money through 3 different accounts before it hit a bank in the Cayman Islands. The most painful part? They had used my own digital signature to authorize some of the transfers. Elena had recorded me saying I approved during a fake conversation about a home renovation project, and Marcus had spliced it into a verification call with the bank. The level of premeditation was staggering. They didn't just want to leave me, they wanted to erase me. Watching them in the hallway of the courthouse that morning, I realized they weren't just greedy, they were arrogant. They truly believed I was the boring engineer who couldn't see past his blueprints. They saw my silence as weakness. They didn't realize that an engineer's silence is usually when he's calculating the exact point of impact. The bailiff called us in. The room smelled of old paper and floor wax. Judge Miller, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach, took the bench. Elena sat at the petitioner's table, looking like the grieving victim of a distant husband. She wore a conservative navy suit and kept her head bowed, playing the role of the neglected wife to perfection. Her lawyer, a high-priced shark named Sterling, began the opening statement by painting me as an absentee partner. He spoke of my obsessive work schedule and how I had abandoned Elena emotionally, forcing her to look elsewhere for support. He actually had the audacity to claim that I had mishandled our joint funds through bad investments, setting the stage for Elena to claim the lion's share of our remaining assets. I sat next to my attorney, Sarah, who remained eerily calm. Sarah didn't have Sterling's flashy suit, but she had a mind like a surgical laser. She leaned over and whispered, "Let them take the lead. The higher they climb, the further they have to fall. I'm not let them get comfortable with their lies." Elena took the stand. She was a natural. She spoke about the lonely nights in our Naperville home and the fear she felt when I came home late, implying that my frustration with work was somehow a threat to her safety. It was a complete fabrication, supported by diaries she had supposedly kept. Diaries that Sarah's team had already proven were written with a pen that didn't exist 3 years ago. The gallery whispered. I could feel the eyes of the court reporter on me. To be lied about is one thing. To be lied about in a temple of justice is another. It felt like the air was being sucked out of the room, but I stayed still. I looked at the floor, counting the tiles, waiting for the moment the structural integrity of her story would fail. If you were in David's shoes, sitting in that courtroom hearing your life being laughed at by the person you loved, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. When it was our turn, Sarah stood up. She didn't approach the podium with a stack of papers. She carried a single USB drive and a stack of notarized documents from a bank in Grand Cayman. Your Honor, Sarah began, her voice echoing with a quiet authority that silenced the room. We don't dispute that money has moved. We simply dispute where it went and who authorized the movement. Sarah didn't start with the affair. She started with the math. She presented the forensic audit that showed the bad investments Sterling mentioned were actually transfers made from Elena's laptop at 3 a.m. while I was on a documented business trip in Cincinnati. Then came the audio. Sarah played a series of recordings captured by Elias. It was Elena's voice, clear as a bell, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the clueless builder. She heard herself say, "He'll be paying off our Spanish villa for the next 30 years, and he won't even know it." The color drained from Elena's face so fast I thought she might faint. Marcus, sitting in the front row of the gallery, shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward the exit. The knockout blow was yet to come. Elena had claimed the Willow Lane house was her only asset, a humble request for a roof over her head after a failed marriage. However, Sarah leaned into the microphone, her voice dropping to a whisper that commanded more attention than a shout. "Your Honor, my client is an engineer. He understands that a building is only as strong as its hidden supports, and Mrs. Harrison has been building a very expensive support system in Miami." Sarah produced a title deed for a luxury penthouse in Brickell, purchased 6 months ago under a shell company named Marel Holdings. The purchase price? $1.2 million. The down payment? The exact amount that had disappeared from my 401k over the last 18 months. The judge's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting from the documents to Elena. "Mrs. Harrison," Judge Miller said, her voice dropping an octave into a dangerous calm. "Are you telling this court, under penalty of perjury, that you have no knowledge of Marel Holdings or a property located at 1200 Brickell Bay Drive?" Elena stammered, her hands shaking so violently she had to grip the edge of the witness stand. She looked toward Sterling, but he was busy looking at his own notes, his face a mask of professional detachment. He was an expensive lawyer, but he wasn't about to go down for suborning perjury. He knew the ship was sinking, and he was already looking for a lifeboat. Marcus, sensing the shift in the room's gravity, tried to stand up in the gallery. "This is a setup," he shouted, his polished exterior finally cracking. "Those documents are forged. David is a structural engineer. He's good with CAD. He probably made them himself." The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Vance, or you will be removed by bailiffs and held in contempt. You are not a party to this litigation. Yet your name appears on every fraudulent wire transfer and shell corporation filing presented today. If I hear another word from you, you'll be watching the rest of these proceedings from a holding cell." I looked back at Marcus. The smug smirk he had in the hallway, the one that had made me feel like a ghost, was gone. He looked small, frantic, and desperate. He was a predator who had finally been cornered by the very man he thought was his prey. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments." Sarah wasn't finished. She called Elias, the private investigator, to the stand. He walked through the digital breadcrumbs Marcus had left behind. Marcus was smart, but he wasn't an engineer. He didn't realize that every time he accessed my accounts from his home office in Evanston, he was leaving a unique IP signature. Elias showed a heat map of logins. While I was on a bridge inspection in a rural part of the Upper Peninsula with no cell service, I was apparently logging into my brokerage account from a Starbucks 3 blocks from Marcus's apartment. It wasn't just theft, Sarah told the court. It was identity scrub. They were systematically replacing David's financial identity with a trail of bad habits and gambling losses to ensure that by the time the divorce was over, he wouldn't just be broke, he'd be unhireable and discredited in his profession. The hearing, which was supposed to be a standard division of assets, had turned into a criminal exposé. Judge Miller didn't wait for a closing argument. She ordered an immediate freeze on all accounts associated with Elena, Marcus, and Marel Holdings. She also issued a ne exeat order, a rare legal move that prevented Elena from leaving the state of Illinois. Elena began to sob, but this time it wasn't the practiced, dainty cry she had used earlier. This was real, ugly, gut-wrenching panic. She looked at me from the witness stand, her eyes wide and pleading. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I didn't blink. I didn't feel a surge of justice-porn adrenaline. I just felt a profound sense of relief, as if a massive, poorly constructed bridge had finally been demolished so a new one could be built in its place. As we exited the courtroom, the roles were completely reversed. I walked out first, my head held high, my briefcase no longer feeling like a weight I had to drag. Sarah walked beside me, already on the phone with the state's attorney's office. Behind us, the hallway was a scene of chaos. Elena was screaming at Marcus, accusing him of ruining her life. Marcus was trying to push past the bailiffs, his expensive suit rumpled, and his face flushed a deep, angry red. Sterling, Elena's lawyer, was halfway down the hall, practically running toward the elevators to distance himself from the wreckage. Standing near the water fountain was the man in the dark suit I had hired weeks ago. He wasn't a private investigator. He was a process server for a separate civil suit I was filing against Marcus for tortious interference and fraud. As Marcus tried to flee, the man stepped into his path and handed him a thick envelope. "You've been served, Mr. Vance. Welcome to the real world." I went back to the house on Willow Lane one last time to pack my things. The perfect colonial house felt like a hollow shell. I walked through the rooms looking at the furniture we had picked out together, the photos on the mantle, the life that was built on a foundation of sand. I didn't take much. I took my tools, my blueprints, and my dog. Everything else, the designer rugs, the expensive art, the legacy Marcus had promised, it could all go. It was all tainted by the lies that had bought it. Within a week, Marcus was picked up by federal agents. It turned out his wealth management business was a front for a much larger scheme, involving several other high-net-worth families in the Chicago suburbs. Elena, desperate to avoid a long prison sentence, turned state's evidence against him. In her attempt to save herself, she lost the house, the condo, and every dime she had tried to steal. She ended up living in a studio apartment in a part of the city she used to mock, working a job she was overqualified for, and paying me restitution for the next 20 years. People often ask me if I hate her now. I tell them that hate is too much energy. In engineering, if a material is found to be defective, you don't hate the material. You remove it and replace it with something that can actually hold the weight. I learned that the people who laugh at your entrance are usually the ones crying at your exit. Arrogance is a blindfold that the wicked wear right until they hit the wall. They thought I was just a builder, but they forgot that a builder knows exactly where the cracks are. I've shared a lot of my personal pain with you today. Tell me, do you believe that justice is always served in the end, or did David just get lucky? Let me know your thoughts below. Today, my life is quiet, and that's exactly how I like it. I sold the house in Naperville and bought a small cabin in the woods near Galena. I went back to what I loved, building things that were meant to last. Small bridges, local community centers, things that serve a purpose. I've met someone new, a woman named Claire who works as a librarian. She doesn't care about offshore accounts or Spanish villas. She values honesty and a well-placed support beam. We take things slow. We're building something, and this time, the foundation is solid rock. I look back at that day in Courtroom 402 as the day I was reborn. Marcus was right about one thing. The man I was dead. That man was naive, easily manipulated, and too trusting. The man who walked out of that courthouse is someone entirely different. Justice isn't always a fast process. It's a slow, methodical grind. It's the sound of a pen on a ledger, the quiet click of a recorded conversation, and the steady gaze of someone who refuses to be erased. Elena and Marcus thought they were the smartest people in the room. They thought they were playing a game. They didn't realize they were up against a man who knew exactly how to dismantle a structure, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the rubble of their own making. They made the mistake of thinking my silence was an absence of thought. It was actually the sound of a countdown. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. This story is a reminder that no matter how dark the betrayal, you have the power to rebuild. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to find the strength to stand up for yourself against all odds, please let us know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of our community here at Family Secrets and Revenge. Your support means the world to us. If you haven't already, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the truth, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late for justice. Until next time, stay strong, keep your foundation solid, and keep seeking the truth.